Good evening, everybody. Today is March 14th, 2023, and the time is now 6:04 p.m. I am Sarah Lewis, Director of Planning, Preservation, and Zoning for the City of Somerville, and I now call this meeting of the Urban Design Commission to order. Pursuant to Chapter 107 of the Acts of 2022, this meeting of the Urban Design Commission is conducted by remote participation. We will make recordings available upon request as soon as possible after the meeting. With me this evening, as I said, my name is Sarah Lewis. With me co-chairing this evening is Courtney Kirk from the Division of Public Space and Urban Forestry. And we'll start with a roll call vote of the commissioners present. Frank Valdez. No Frank. Andrew Abba.
Present.
Deborah Fennick.
Think it doesn't show you're muted, Deborah, but we did not hear you.
No, we did not hear you.
This is Andrew.
All right,
G.
we clearly
If I can just
You got a big thumbs up.
jump in to say that check your input for your mic, Deborah. That might be the issue. Whatever your setting is, if you go just to the audio setting, you might be able to change it. Thanks. Sorry, Sarah.
That's okay. So we do have, Deborah is in attendance and we have a thumbs up from her. Tim Talon.
Present.
Sherry Ruan.
Here.
And Tim Hood is not with us this evening, as we do have quorum. So the first order of business for this evening is the continued design review for 35 McGrath Highway. This is continued from February 28th. Deborah was not present at that meeting, but has signed the form saying that she has listened to the meeting, which means all of our commissioners are ready to vote this evening. At the last meeting, the commission requested more oh, I can't talk this evening. Sorry, you all. The commission requested more developed massing and facade studies for options A and C, and more development of the landscape. So we still need to vote on a massing option, the facade option, and whether the design guidelines have been met for the high-rise district. And then to determine if we want to incorporate any additional design guidance to the.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So Andrew, can you unmute the team so they can present, please?
Yes, if the team for 35 McGrath could please use the raise hand feature, and I will promote you. And if someone could also identify when they have been promoted who the presenter is, that would be greatly appreciated.
Hi, it's PK. Hello, can anybody hear me?
Andrew, this is Dave Gadish. I'll be presenting.
We can hear you.
Okay, BK, you should be able to present now.
Andrew, can you, sorry, this is Dave Gadish.
Hi,
Can you
it's
hear me?
PK. Can everybody hear me?
presenting.
Not sure that you can.
All right, David, did you say you were going to be presenting?
Yes, that's
David, we can hear you. Okay. BK, we can hear you. We can't see you.
This is
Well,
Andrew
that we'll
G.
have to do then. I'm sorry about that.
There's a lag on my end. That's why I think I'm not responding. Can someone just confirm from the applicant team who is presenting? David.
And-
Okay, thank you so much.
I am David.
All right, there's lag on my end too, Andrew. I'm gonna go off camera, but I am still here.
David, are you
Everyone
able
see
to
my
do
screen?
full screen for that?
Yes.
Excellent. Sarah, we had some slides, Sarah and Courtney, thank you so much for having us and members of the commission. We did have some context slides in the beginning, but I think everyone is familiar with the site. So we thought we would go right to the proposed massing concepts, if that is okay with everyone.
Yeah, I
So
think just
we
flip
had-
through quickly. If there's any
Okay.
members of the public.
That's right. Why don't you head back up, David, to the front?
We don't
And
have
we'll
that.
just click through the images very quickly to show the context where the site is. So here it is located on McGrath Highway, right near the new Greenway extension, Green Line extension. That is it located in the red dashed line. It's an existing data center with no windows. We have some images of it right there. You can see Brick Bottom is on the upper left, the Greenway extension and the pedestrian bridge you can see are crossing behind the site on the north side of the site. This is it looking at the building from the north side of the site. Can you just point to it, David, right there? Yep. That's the view coming up at the beginning of Squires Bridge that begins its structure or abutment just before our site boundary. So we are sharing an entrance with the 15 McGrath project that was permitted earlier this year. And you'll see that in the site plan diagrams as well. So there is our building. There is a storage facility to the left of us. And then we included some images of the permitted 15 McGrath project because they are our immediate abutter, and we wanted to make sure that there was a reflexive conversation with the language of our building, the massing of our building and their building. That is an elevation of their building. We are approximately the same height as their building. And you'll see the differences in the site plan when we get to that. So when we left off the last time, it was suggested that we take a look at the massing. We got down to 2 massing options, and so we've separated the massing for each of these options from the facades. So we thought we would go through the massing again very quickly and then show you the different facade options. The concept for massing option A was really to start in the upper left, look at the envelope. You could see that the site is actually angled on McGrath Highway along the property line. And then to kind of step back on the sides, work on a base middle top. We split the front of the building as well as the rear of the building into 2 different vertical planes for this option. So it would have stepped facades that related to the parallel alignment of McGrath Highway. And then we pulled back the penthouse on this option as well. Next, David. So you could see here is the massing of this option. It's essentially 2 vertical elements on the front and the north of the building. And then the penthouse is set back to the right-hand side of that on this one, then it steps back on the rear a little bit as well. That is the
So just
view.
a point of,
Yep.
just a clarification on last image. Is the plane of the penthouse facing McGrath, is that coplanar with the facade of the building below on the step deck piece, or is it set back?
I think that it's set back, but only about a couple of feet.
Okay. Thank
Is
you.
that right, David?
Yeah, that in this option, yeah, it's we do have it set back further for more of a green roof on the front of this one. So the top screen is set back, but the penthouse itself is fairly coplanar.
All right, so one of the suggestions that we had at the previous meeting was to incorporate the penthouse into the design. And so what we did was we pulled the penthouse into the language and the massing of the building below, so that what you're looking at the very top that is stepped back is just the screen. It is not the enclosed penthouse itself. We'll see in both options how we try to incorporate that more cleanly so you weren't looking at a 40-foot high penthouse. This option still does step back that screen at the top of the building, particularly on the brick bottom side, because it lessened the shadow impact there. This is it looking from the brick bottom parking lot, and then this is it looking at it from the north. The option 2, more sculptural version, we're now calling concept B, and you can see how we progressed with that. Pulling back the building along McGrath Highway in a sculpted form, carving out the upper left-hand corner in step 3 that you can see on the north side of the building, so that we would have a green space on that side of the building. And then we have views of that as well. So this option has a 1-story base to the building. Some of the options for concept A have a 2-story base to the building. We would have to go back and get a zoning variance to have that 2-story base. And in our conversations with Andrew and others, we're showing you some options, but the preference is probably to have a 1-story base like 15 McGrath, and as our variants allow us. So this is the concept where the penthouse in this revised version is now fully incorporated into the sculptural form itself. It's not a separate form that is set back and turned around. Then we sculpted the top of it on the west facade facing the brick bottom area and farther west. And this is a long distance view that shows how it might play out. And we did think it was doing some nice things to the skyline and also setting itself off nicely from the 15 McGrath building. This looks at it from the brick bottom area where it stepped down in the back. So it's just the penthouse and the roof screen that are pushed back up above, and that's where the green roof would be in this scheme. And then this shows the sculptural form from the north side next to the pedestrian bridge. So before we go on, does anybody have any questions just about the 2 massing options that we're proposing?
I have a question about the second one. Is the long face, is that sculptural, or is that are we looking at a flat face with
That is pretty
Really?
much a flat facade, Deborah. And some of the skin options, we're looking at having it in 2 different planes based upon where those angles are, but it is not folded like the front is.
okay.
So
Okay.
we're folding the skyline a bit more. And in some of our options, that roof screen will actually be probably a transparent material or a perforated material, because it's going to have less shadow impact again on the brick bottom parking area.
Okay, so it's the short sides that are sculpted.
Correct.
Thank
And
you.
we're set back about 5'1" off of the property line on either side. So we're pretty limited in terms of the ins and outs that we can do. And it's a trapezoidal site with a slightly shifted core in the center.
All right, I would recommend keeping going at the moment so that we can make sure that we get all the presentation completed. We have about, technically we have about 10 minutes left.
Yep, that should be fine. So if we go through the different facade options, we have 3 for concept A, we have 3 for concept B. And from left to right, we have a lighter, more colorful facade that we were looking at with a 1-story read, and then a vertical reading of kind of Western solar shades that are running down the front of the building. Option 2 has more horizontal sunshades that are going in that glassy area. It still has 2 planes that it's working with, or 2 different step back planes. And then option 3, we were trying to wrap the bays, the front of the building, around the sides in more of a bay language. So that option has terracotta on the sides, a punched window scheme, which from different perspectives, they all look fairly different, but keeping within the massing. And then a little bit more industrial look to the way the floor slabs and the frames are treated around those bays. So why don't we just quickly walk through the different views. So this is the first option. And you can see the vertical louvers that are kind of dropping down in the front of the building. And that is where we can have the most daylight, Deborah. We're only allowed 25% on the sides of the buildings. So we're focused really on the ends of the building, which is where administrative and office space and other things would be. And then that shows it really from the different views that we have from the brick bottom area and other locations. We think it's fairly elegant. It's not really looking like a large office building or a lab building necessarily from the edges, but it is from the ends of the building. And that's it on the north. Option 2, we wanted to try to relate a little bit more to the color of the storage building next to it and some of the warmer masonry colors. So we wanted to try something that was a copper or bronze color with horizontal louvers in the glassy areas of the ends, wrapping around. And those colors start to pick up the colors on the right-hand side of the 15 McGrath building a little more strongly than those vertical shades in the first option. The highlight color that we're showing is kind of an orangey red. We're thinking that that might be a different color as we study it more. And then this is looking at it from the brick bottom area. And then from the north facade, we've continued this language of 2 different vertical elements about the same width. As the building gets wider on this facade, we have infilled in between. And then the third facade was more of a terracotta facade. That would be maybe a yellowish orange, and then with punched windows. And then we can wrap around this so you can see how that feels. We played a little bit with that sawtoothing of the terracotta. Think we like it. We're still not sure. I think that would have to be refined a bit and developed if this were one of the schemes we would move forward with. It's a little bit heavy right now, but it still is interesting. And then the 3 options that we have for the concept B massing was a very simple on the left-hand side, but elegant all glass facades where it was a slightly more reflective glass so that you pick up the changes in the shaping of the building by the change of the way the light hits it. The middle option, we decided to try something in the opposite direction and actually put a framed language around that so that we would accentuate all those edges with an extruded frame language. And then the one on the right, we went back and looked at using horizontal shades, sunshades on the outside of the building that are spaced approximately 18 to 2 feet apart vertically. As another means to really accentuate the folds that are happening. And then you can see in that right-hand triangle that is facing, and it's sitting above the lobby and facing the entrance, we decided to remove those so that there'd be an element that was a little bit more of a shard that was as part of this. So you have 2 different languages that worked its way around the building. So let's click through these, David. First option from McGrath. As you're moving around it. And you could see some two different kind of colorations on the side that would be different glass, spandrel glass, and some vision glass on that side of the building. And then up at the top where the roof screen is the most transparent would be a third material. Second option, you can just click right around. This language on the side of the building became more of a punched window language, and it accentuated the elements on the top. I think our preference would be to have a more singular approach than this, particularly on the sides of the building, but it's a good study. And then finally, the last option. And one of the things we would still be working on here is where those horizontal shades would be, where they would not be. Here, they're run pretty much across the entire face, but it wouldn't make sense in the areas that are solid and don't have vision glass. And I think it would also add some additional interest and texture to the building if those drop off in a designed fashion. So those are our primary ideas. So let's click through the floor plans, and then we have some landscape updates, and then we're finished. So David, let's.
5 minutes left to present. Sorry for the interruption.
Yep. David, why don't you walk through the plans?
Sure. So on the left-hand side here is McGrath Highway and the new jug handle drop off here. You'll immediately come into the main lobby as well as the bike room, having a separate exit here. The ground floor of this building is largely back of house oriented with all of the transformer vaults, the loading dock. As BK mentioned earlier, we are sharing a drive lane with 15 McGrath just page south here. So the trucks would come in and our loading dock is here shared with the drive around 15 McGrath. We have this will be a lab building is the plan. So we do have the back of house required for those, as well as along the front here coming in off of our drive is a 3-story below grade garage. And so we do have the entrance to our garage off the front, for which we do have a variance due to the constrained site. Our typical core, as you will see going up, actually I'm not sure if we have that plan, but we did think it was important to show the roof. This is showing one of the schemes, scheme A, as far as the roof, the green roof would be in the front here to go along with our green score. If the desired massing for option B were decided, the green roof actually moves towards the northern side here, facing the tracks and the brick bottom artists rather, in the northwest. And saving some time for the Bowler group to discuss the landscape updates.
Thanks, David. Yep. So context plan here, if you want to move forward. Look at the overall plan. So again, we have a nice buffer on the northeast side of the building, deciduous evergreen trees, shrubs, perennials, native planting. North and south sides of the building would be pervious pavement. And then as we come around to the front, we incorporated some additional green, both at the building edge and at the sidewalk to make that a little bit more engaging as you walk through the space. We also added a raised crosswalk that would connect to the new jug handle sidewalk to give that sense of arrival, and then also make it a little bit more inviting to potentially activate that green space across the driveway. Additionally, the sidewalk going page north from the entrance, there is a pedestrian sidewalk there. Then at the garage entrance, hierarchy is given to the pedestrians as they cross there, so vehicles would drive up onto the sidewalk level, then into the garage. So anybody walking across there would be given the hierarchy to traverse that area. Additionally, we have some planting in the front in planters and some seating and bike racks as well. So how those all shake out would be developed a little bit further down the road. But I think this does a great job of integrating some more green into the front with the pervious concrete pavers. And then just moving forward to some of the slides, because see the character, again, at the front with the planting and the paving interacting there, some benches, maybe street life type of planter, But design language, warm wood, some Corten, and concrete pavers. The rear, again, the buffer, we also include some plant lists of some potential planting that would be included in these areas. Then lastly, the green roof, low planting, about 6 inches of soil, so low level planting types, but that'd be a nice amenity as well.
Then lastly, here we do have our green score, of which we are achieving the required quantity here, and obviously this will be developed further along with the progression of the design. That's what we have.
Can you remind us where the limits of the garage below grade is?
Yes, let me go back to the ground floor plan. The slurry wall or foundation wall rather will be about 2.5 feet off of the property boundary. So it is going underneath the green shown here. So we'll be building up the soil on top with enough depth suitable for trees. Similarly to the front here as well.
Just a clarification on both schemes, A or B, you have a green roof. It's just the difference is the orientation. And it's about the same size in either scheme.
That's correct.
That's
Yes.
correct.
Yeah.
Another clarifying question on the green roof is it's surrounded by mechanical roof screening.
There would be
Green is
screening
behind
around
the green roof, but that's right.
Okay.
And the only reason one is on the back is because in the sculptural form, it made more sense. When we looked at a stepped form, it just didn't make as much sense from a massing point of view. So that's why we shifted it to the other side. Want to go back to the massing and you can discuss some of the bigger ideas?
Let's start with the massing and then get into the facade and work through this logically, if that's all right with the commission.
That sounds good. I can start if there aren't any other questions. So first, to thank you for developing 3 options for 2 massing options. That's a lot of work in a short amount of time. Appreciate that. The opportunity to comment on it. You know, overall, as I look at both of these massing options, I think there's merit in both of them. And I don't have a strong preference one way or the other. But in thinking about this, I think there's a real opportunity that's kind of unique to this site with option 2, the more faceted. You know, it's a really large scale gesture, the idea of faceting this facade, doing something more sculptural like that wouldn't really be appropriate a lot of places in Somerville. You know, something like that would not be appropriate in the middle of Davis Square, the middle of Union Square, or something like that where it really is a more pedestrian, small scaled environment or even assembly. But, you know, here we are, this really is highway side, and, you know, McGrath's going to improve. But this is always going to be a highly visible corner along a very busy and large street here. And, you know, maybe that type of sculptural form and architectural language is appropriate and is an opportunity at a site like this. I also think, just in thinking about the actual form of the facets, and I think you mentioned a couple of times in both options, you know, the need to refine and continue to develop, and that's, you know, understandable at this stage. But I think, you know, another thing that's unique about this property is its orientation of the property line to the street. You went and got the variance for the accession there. And there's an opportunity to take the geometry of that property line and the unique geometry of the site and have it read in the building form as well and use that as a generator for the form.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about the massing also. I'm surprised I prefer Tim for many of the same reasons you do, the faceted alternative. One, seeing it in black and white, the other fits in well, but it tends to I think it's more interesting here as a counterpoint to what appears to be which is a very large surface. And so I appreciate that. Also like what you've done to the roof with it and the screen at the penthouse. I think that screen would be really interesting if it were a perforated metal that was radiated and it became more transparent towards the top as opposed to a very sharp shape that's very regular. Even if it could creep down a little bit into the panel, the next floor below or something, it could be really interesting. I think, and I also like, we're just talking about the form. Okay, I won't talk about facade yet. No, but for this one, I think the second one, it contradicts the positive things about the form, the form. I don't think it enhances it. I think it's actually does not support it. But I think that third one where there are facets that have a different kind of skin on them, I think is really interesting. I think you have one right now, it seems, at least on the street side. It could be interesting to introduce it in one other place or two other places. But I think, I think a lot of the moves you've made on the development on this is really interesting and, has some interesting places it could go.
I agree with the architects for what it's worth. I prefer the faceted scheme. Over the course of the past 3 years, we've looked at a lot of buildings that look like sort of different variations of the first scheme, and it's kind of a relief to see one that sort of jumps off the page, and especially compared to 15 McGrath, where it's relatively uniform in what we're looking at now, to have a moment that's a little bit funkier and a little bit weirder, and I think to Tim's point relates to some of the vehicular scale of the site itself. Makes a lot of sense, and it's kind of nice and fun to see.
Ditto.
So our line of thinking on this was we did want to do, because it's a very small footprint building, something that was very efficient. So we started with the first option. And then, in discussions with Ken and the ownership team, we thought, that making a boutique R&D building might be a very good thing for both the marketing and also the long distance views of this project. Because as you all just said, the rectangular forms that are extruded upward in the roofless gang of facts that many lab buildings have become, it does some good things for the inside of the building and the efficiency, but we think we can do that even with this sculptural scheme, because we're really only working on the ends of the facade, and then the sides we're trying to sculpt in a creative way, but it's all the efficiencies all already built in on that part. And I think we've convinced our client, Ken, that this is an affordable option as well as a beautiful sculptural option. He's silent, so maybe we haven't.
Well, while I'm not fully convinced about it, but it is certainly striking, especially and the white. If Danny, if you could go to the third B3 option, the same angle. This is what kind of made me feel different about it. Obviously cost is the forefront of everybody, in my position's mind, but when you're talking about, something that we're trying to be a new front door for Brick Bottom. You know, we thought that we had a real opportunity here. And also, you know, given the lab market and, you know, I feel like if I was an R&D building, you know, this is something that would stand out for me if I was a tenant. So, you know, as I'm trying to justify the additional costs for that, you know, that's how I'm going to do it to our extended team and partners, making sure that, you know, people don't just look at this as just as the cost. You know, it really is something that can be a statement.
Sarah, how would you like to proceed? Should we go into the facade options, or do you want to take a vote on the massing?
Yeah, I'm hearing fairly unanimous on the massing. So if somebody on the commission would like to make a motion to approve facade, to approve massing option B, the faceted approach, I will entertain that.
So moved.
Do I have a second? Seconded by Tim Talon. Moved by Deborah, sorry. Seconded by Tim Talon. Roll call vote. Sherry,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Deborah,
Yes.
and Andrew.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. Then let's talk about the facade options. Seems like we have we've already started talking about option 3, so let's maybe start there, or opening up to the other commissioners. Tim Talon, are you actually sitting quietly? Come on.
It's coming for you.
I'll just offer, I think option 2 feels a little
Go
bit
ahead.
like, option 2 presents in this rendering a little bit like a parking garage to me. And it's hard for me to get away from that mentally. But I could be convinced otherwise by the architects. I feel like option 1 or 3 feel more elegant and would blend more from a reflective perspective. Just my 2 cents.
Tim, do you want to go, and then I could just respond or tell you what we're thinking?
Sure. I think for me, the big move here is in the form. It's this faceted form. And I think whatever is done with the facade, you know, should reinforce that and complement it and not be trying to do too much. Option 2 for me is trying to do a little too much, and I think distracts from the kind of larger moves in the form. So I'd take option 2 off the table. And so then between option 3 and option 1, and one of the things that is successful about 3 is the reading of the diagonal lines, the change in plane at the facets, you know, and how that gets detailed. You know, that'll be a lot of study on that. But I think that helps reinforce the form. I'm looking at option 1. It's actually interesting. You don't read some of the folds on the left-hand side of the front facade, and I'm not sure why that is. If it's because it's such a small change in plane, or if it's, you know, what that is. But I think as you continue to refine the massing, think it'll be important to make sure that there's enough of a changing between these different planes that it really is legible from all different perspectives.
Yeah, so I agree with that.
So my 2 cents.
Sorry, just really quickly, I think that, so I agree with what you just said. I feel like the reflective it just may start to cause, you may lose the reading of the form of it. And it just may be too dynamic and reflecting buildings around it and things like that. With whether you proceed with 1 or 3, I think the success of this is going to be that Penthouse reads as a part of the form. And so I'll go back to, so I feel like it should be, I don't know, reflective with perforated, that's great, that is more solid towards the bottom and more, it's lighter and more transparent towards the top. And I think that's true of 1 or 3. But I do think changing the quality of the facade, the addition, I guess, of that's horizontal sunshade that you have on that. Yeah, that does, I think, reinforce the form.
So I'm wondering if one of the things that is really nice about the faceted form is that it emphasizes the verticality of this building. And it already has a vertical proportion, but it's emphasizing it even more. And I feel like dividing it up horizontally, as in option 3, it's almost like a kind of industrial building style window applied to this building form. A more horizontal glazing unit proportion. Is that taking away from the form? I wonder if it just wants to be simple, vertically proportioned glazing units, and maybe even more vertically proportioned than option 1. Instead of the 5'6", you go into the 3'8".
I think all of those comments are right on. For us, and Sarah, I think, were you going to give some comments on facades too? Because then I can tell you our thinking afterwards, or anyone else.
I had a question.
I was only going to make a comment that I think what's difficult to see here, but Deborah made a good point about reflecting the surrounding buildings. I think option 1 will be, it's hard to model because of the lighting effects, but I would imagine there's going to be a lot more change than we see in the renderings in the reality, given the light orientation or reflection of that glass.
I had a question. So the 4 trees in the front are kind of blocking our view of the building as it interacts with the public realm. Do we have any views that kind of show us what that looks like on these schemes?
David, do we have that? For some reason, we couldn't get our SketchUp model to appear. Otherwise, we were going to show that.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think we have the trees hidden this time around.
Hit that
So
one.
I agree. Option 1 and option 3 are definitely the pieces that they're the ones I like the most. But I don't really feel like I have much of a sense of what it looks like at the bottom. And that garage door in all 3 of them looks enormous. And it would be great to know if there was some way that the facade treatment or the facade could work to take that read of the giant garage door down a notch.
Right. And I think the coloration of the base in contrast to the glass is going to help it. Right now it is a medium gray, and it could be a darker color. It could have some better contrast that would make that disappear a bit more. And I think you're right, Sarah, that we did have some trouble rendering this one, and the first step, they've almost completely disappeared, and we're not sure why. Usually with our Enscape level of reflectivity and so on, it's fine. The lessons we're learning from option 1 is that the change of materiality on this facade does help a kind of more long distance reading than in option 3. But as a team, we like the potential opportunities that option 3 was providing in terms of having some kind of textured facade language and then having it peel back and have a glassier language, as opposed to only dealing with an all glass building in different colors of glass in the building. So I think we would prefer to head in the direction of option 3, taking some lessons learned from option 1. Option 2, in our mind, you know, we'd like to not judge these things, and we did a whole bunch of other ones that we judged and threw out. We don't like to judge it until, you know, we step back. That one seemed to be too mannered to us, and just too heavy, and was pulling away from the sculptural effect with a heavy architectural language on top of it, particularly the end facades, which, even though they're efficient, we lost some grace, I think, in the bigger gesture, and it started to disappear at a very different scale than what I think we would prefer to go in. So if you go to option 3, David, and just click through those images. Right, so that facade is so far working the best. That other shard on the left-hand side that might benefit from having some things removed, at least maybe not the entire thing, but partial parts of it. So there's a language that we're trying to develop, or would be developed if this were the selected scheme, of where we have texture, where we don't have texture, what is happening on the side of the building, long distance, so that it doesn't all get lost in a grid. And Tim, as you said, these are horizontal sunshades on a vertical piece of glass, but I think looking at the meter of the vertical mullions, as well as, you know, what we need for texture versus sunshades, is something that we would be exploring next. Because there, it all looks like it's the same, just with a couple of big angles. And on the north here, we think it's kind of sexy, but it could use something else that is traveling down in the bigger gestures, like the first option. And that goes the same on the north face, where it's interesting, but we're not convinced that the folds are in the right place yet, or that there's an opportunity to have a little bit more information. Like if you were to delete the horizontal sunshades here or change it, where would you do it so that it looks like the building is talking to you from this side? That's the other thing that we think we would have to study on this portion.
So on
The
the
comment I don't
on the
want to lose
side-
track of in this that Deborah made reference to earlier was the idea that perhaps the glassiness, what I'm going to call the glassy facade versus the grid, is incorporated more. So Deborah, I didn't know if you wanted to return to that now we're instead of just the massing.
What was that, Sarah?
When we were talking about the massing, you had referenced the idea that perhaps the glassy curtain wall that is shown on the front might occur elsewhere on the building as well as an exploration. So I didn't want to lose track of that if we wanted to discuss that a little more.
Yeah, I still think that's worth exploring. You know, is it at the corner? Is it at the left corner, you know, in wrapping or something? I don't know, it'd make the building a little more three-dimensional. I mean,
Right.
you know, it would start to bring it into the round, this idea. But yeah, but it would require some study. I'm too symmetrical, so I don't know if that's a great idea from the front.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment about the folds of the building. And I do think that the front sort of triangle that's angled where the building entrance is a successful move, just in terms of trying to negotiate the odd geometries that you have on site, where, you know, if you think about a pedestrian arriving to this site, you know, they're probably not going to walk the full sidewalk length that you have drawn and cross perfectly perpendicular to where you've located the front door, and they're probably going to be cutting a diagonal almost in the same diagonal line as that first fold. And I think that that's a real opportunity to sort of signify the right place for a person to arrive on foot or bike to this strange site that you have to access from, you know, a service road. And I think some of that logic, you know, you've asked about the backside, and I think you can start to get inspiration from where the viaduct of the community path and someone's experience of this backside of the building as they are at a different level, you know, as a pedestrian or bike on the viaduct versus their experience on a train. And I think, you know, a lot of the buildings on this corridor perhaps do not give enough credit to the backside of the building and just the thousands and thousands of people that will be seeing these buildings from the back end.
Right.
And that back end is your multi-use path, is if I'm remembering correctly. So that's where people are going to experience it more intimately. Isn't that the multi-use path there?
That is.
Yeah. So I bet you're gonna have more foot traffic and bike traffic there than the front, I think. If it,
And
yeah.
in
I hope
general,
we're
we're trying to
there.
think of that as the north end and not at the back, because the building does have a front. But this is so important in our minds. We're always thinking about this as the north side of the building. And you're right, it is lacking one or two elements, Courtney, that are looking towards you as you're coming up that viaduct or even on the train, that the front element right now has. So that's one of the things we'll be looking at.
You go back to the side of the building.
We're
in this,
over our 20. Go ahead, Tim.
So if I'm understanding this right, kind of in between every other of the strong verticals, it's either all vision glass or all spandrel glass. Is that right? So there's kind of large expanses of solid wall.
Meet BK.
All right, it is going to be, yes, at least that, and probably more solid than vision. So even within the vision, you know, even within some of those cones that might be look more glassy and not have louvers or horizontal texture, then there's going to be even smaller amounts of vision glass. So we have to figure out how to develop those so they accentuate the form.
Yeah, seeing some of the other options, if those were with the punch windows, which were largely solid, if that is the 25%, it felt like perhaps this is more than 25%, if that's your limitation. And so I wonder, and then there's also, you know, the challenge of large expanses of solid on the perimeter of the building. I actually like the proportion of these pieces, so I hesitate to suggest this, but I wonder if there's the opportunity to kind of introduce more facets, more pieces. So you're getting narrower pieces of vision glass going up and narrower pieces of solid next to it. And maybe it's a little wider solid piece, a little narrower vision piece, but it gives you a little more flexibility to vary more solid. As well as just more vertical pieces there.
Right.
The other
I
suggestion,
totally agree.
the other thing I'll just put out there for discussion is there, I'm curious if you explored this scheme at all, what if those solid pieces were solid instead of a spandrel glass? So instead of reading as a glass cube, we're reading solid void, solid void, solid void, and then the ends of the building. really open up, and are they all glass faceted pieces?
Yeah, we also welcome that study, particularly because of what we saw in option 1, where it did look like it could be 2 different things, not necessarily all reflective glass. The trick, as you know, is going to be making sure that transition in the front doesn't take away from the sculptural form of the entire building as you're going from mostly glass to a combination of materials. And that's why we started to introduce that, those shards that didn't have any of the horizontals on it. So I do agree that we have to study this and make the vision glass part of the overall language, and perhaps break it down on particular in this facade, but in a manner that's maybe a secondary melody rather than changing the rhythm to something that's very small and then getting to the ends and having it be bigger, slower gestures. So those are the problems that we see ahead, or the challenges. But we think it's got a lot of potential. I'm not sure if we've lost Sarah. We could go on to well, you can decide. Our preference would be to develop this language with lessons learned from the first one and throw the second one out. But we want to save time to discuss the landscape if you have comments on that also.
Yeah, sorry all, I'm having all sorts of difficult with hearing, so I'm getting hiccups. But are there any comments on landscape?
Yeah, I wanted to see the plan again, if we could, just to understand the, yeah, so if you could zoom in on the front plaza a little bit more. Thanks. So will there be seating elements integrated into the planted beds? You mentioned warm wood and Corten, and will that be retaining those planting areas, and will there be seating integrated into those edges? And what are the planter that you call out, just the little circles? You imagining that's just like one small tree? What are those intended to be between the bracketing the bike racks and then the building entrance?
So along the building, because we are undercover there, or presumed to be with how things will shake out, so that would be more of a seasonal planting in those planters adjacent to the building. And then the Corten, thinking more of an edge material, and we could have a bench incorporated into probably one in both sides of or both planters. One could be potentially facing the door, and then on the northern one, probably facing out. So that could be your ride share waiting spot, or waiting for an employee to come out. So I think we could incorporate a bench into those 2 areas.
Yeah, and Sherry, the other thing is that, I talked to Jay a little bit that out in front of 15 McGrath, they have the use of Corten out in front of their building. They have some planters that are Corten. So I felt like on the streetscape side, it may be good for us to introduce some of that vertical Corten element as it comes through. We're still kind of, as you can tell from the facades, it's 2 very different buildings. So the landscape is going to change a little bit based on the angles of the building. So this is more a concept than it is kind of a final product. Is that and if you go to the next slide, Dave, I think that it's a little bit better. I think that introducing this type of angled planting and some vertical core 10 to match what 15 McGrath is doing. And then, further defining, once we decided which one of the very different concepts is happening above us, how that's going to relate to the ground plane.
Right. Yeah, I think it would be really nice to have some of the shard language reflected in this ground plane. And I think the seating being integrated with the planters would be successful. Don't underestimate the benefit of seating in these right angle nooks where two people can sit sort of in close proximity to each other. And I think those planters right along the facade of the building, because the building is such a statement, I think they have to be somewhat robust and have a presence there, so it doesn't feel like sort of like an afterthought or an add-on or something like that. And then the last question I had was across the raised crosswalk, that sidewalk seems to change in width, and I wasn't sure what the green polygon at the very end of the sidewalk where the diagonal crosswalk is at the top there, what's happening there. And I just wanted to, I guess I'm just curious about that sidewalk and what the design of that from pedestrian access, how that's working.
Sure. So I believe the design of that will shake out a little bit further down the road, Ken.
Yeah, my guess is, and I think that's kind of a leftover because we addressed it with this raised crosswalk and kind of raised tabletop at the garage entrance. So I don't know if we'd even necessarily need to continue that sidewalk all the way down. But that is something that we're going to have to work with Mass DOT on, and they're going to have to accept whatever conditions that we set for, or we request, or we'll have to, more likely we'll have to do what they tell us to do. But I think I liked this raised crosswalk, and that could open up a little bit more green space for us. And we're working with HSH on some additional studies out here to see if we can get a little bit more plaza in the front of this in the front of the building here. So,
and I think the materiality of the plaza and the raised crosswalk, I mean, in my opinion, I think it should go all the way to the edge of the planting. So there's legibility in this connection and this connectivity and this priority language visibly. I think it just makes for a stronger public realm.
Okay, thank you.
I agree with everything Jerry said, so I'm not going to repeat that. I do appreciate seeing a design in here, and I agree that as it develops, as the building design develops, having it reflect that makes a lot of sense. I would definitely encourage you guys to check out the Somerville's urban forestry. What's it called, Courtney? Urban forestry management plan?
Management plan.
Got it.
UFMP.
Yeah, that Courtney's office put together. It has a really great inventory of the tree species that we have in abundance in Somerville and those that we really need. And it jumps out the honey locust is one that's noted as probably the tree that we have too much of in Somerville. So I think reviewing that document would be great in terms of just informing what species we really need on the space that we have in this project. And then I think just on the back side of the building, I don't know if we can see that here. It is, it is right now. I guess I'm concerned or not really understanding how anyone would get out there to do any maintenance. And even if we stack it with 100% native species, there is a certain amount of maintenance and a certain amount of access that needs to be provided back there. If we're just kind of doing what we're seeing here and putting a bunch of plants back there, I'm concerned that in the future, 10, 20 years down the road, we have just kind of a space that unmaintained becomes an incubator for invasive species. So I think just thinking about how this is viewed, especially from from the, what do you call it? The trail up above, I'm forgetting the cycle situation.
Community path.
Thank you. It's a rough day. Thinking about how it's viewed from the community path, and then just being practical about how somebody might maintain this space, even if it is on the north facade of the building, would be helpful.
Right, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'd have to have maintenance access out there, even if it was, for collecting trash, but maintenance of the plants as well. So we'll be working with the team to make sure there's maintenance access.
And it's back to the point of, like, because you guys are so tight on your green score, that once you start putting maintenance paths back here, like, how is that going to work? I guess is the question.
We'll be sure to
Well,
work.
the green roof might get a little bit bigger if we can get it to work. But yeah, I definitely understand that we definitely need to get maintenance back here in some way.
And other than that, I appreciate you guys picking up as many comments as you did.
Same.
And if you can just go 2 slides back to number 72. Looking at this, I see the dashed lines. I think that was of scheme 1, massing scheme 1, showing the projections of the building. The cantilevers out over the area in the lobby and the parking entry. I think one of the things that someone picked up on was the visual prominence of the garage entry. I think projecting the building out over that garage entry is going to help visually and just having it feel less prominent there. So I wonder with the facets, I think you have a straight edge all the way across garage entrance and across the bike parking as well. I wonder whether it's possible to maybe project out over the garage entry there, and that creates an opportunity for some additional variation in the angles between the facets, helps screen the garage entry visually. You pick up a little more leasable area too.
Yep, super. We'll look at that.
Let's roll.
So I think I feel ready to vote on a
Yeah,
facade option. I'm comfortable,
Same.
designating option 3, but with additional modifications. I think overall, in terms of next steps, I feel like this is headed in a good direction, clearly. I appreciate the attention of the team, but I still don't have a real sense of kind of exactly what the building's gonna look like, or even what its final form is. So I'm not sure. It feels like it's at more of a conceptual stage than projects at a similar stage that we've seen. So I'm not sure, what the team's preference is and what our preference is as a commission. Whether this comes back again or whether it moves forward, but perhaps without us confirming that it's compliant with all the design guidelines, because we just haven't seen that finished product yet.
I think I would be comfortable seeing it move forward. I feel like the team has been receptive to the comments that we've had so far. And if it's a developed version of B3, that seems to be, I don't know, that seems to be what we're looking for anyway. Deborah and Sherry?
I concur.
Yeah, I'm fine with moving ahead, but incorporating the comments that we made today in our recommendation.
Okay.
Or looking at the things that we had suggested should be looked at, that sort of stuff. Oops, Sarah, are you trying to talk? I think
yeah, can you hear me?
now we can.
Yep.
Everything is delayed. I'm sorry. A Courtney, will you call the vote for me?
So yeah, so just to clarify, so when you all are saying you're comfortable moving the project forward, this is to vote on we'll vote. You guys, did you vote on the massing? I can't remember
Yeah.
if you took an
Voted
official
on
vote.
the
Okay.
massing.
We did.
Yeah.
And so voting on facade option 3 for concept B, correct?
Yep.
Is that the motion that I'm hearing?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
Correct.
Do I have a motion for concept B option 3?
So motioned.
Do I have a second?
So seconded.
All right. I have a motion made by Andrew Arbaugh, seconded by Sherry Ruane. Roll call vote. Andrew Arbaugh,
Yes.
Sherry Ruane,
Yes.
Tim Talon,
Yes.
Deborah Fennick.
Yes.
All right. Concept B option 3 is voted unanimously as the preferred scenario. So Sarah, I'm not sure what other, I think we need the design guideline vote, or is that what you all are saying you need more time on?
Well, so this is the one for me that I'm questioning whether we take a vote on now or approve. I think, for example, there's a design guideline that specifically relates to the integration of the penthouse, the all form and materiality of the thing, which I think clearly this project is headed that direction and appreciate the refinements. However, there's a facade and there's a perforated metal screening the rooftop mechanicals and plane, and I don't think we really understand how those two materials are coming together yet. And there were a number of comments about that. And I think another design guideline that relates to the coherent, harmonious form. Again, clearly it's headed in that direction, but we haven't seen kind of, I won't say final elevations, but there's still a lot of work to refine the elevations. And it's not a criticism of the team, it's just where the project's at now. So I think,
Okay, so am I hearing a motion to continue this project with further development on addressing the design guidelines and
Yes.
incorporating the feedback you all have given today?
Sarah, I guess, do you have any comment on that, Sarah? Because I know the message has been given to us that the preference would be to have us move these things along in two, but I think Tim's comments are also very true in terms of where the project is given the sort of holistic scope. So I don't know if, does the city have an opinion one way or the other on what we do in a situation like this? Never mind. We can't, I don't think we can hear you, Sarah. I can't hear you.
I'll chat.
We heard
Sarah, I can
that.
hear you. Yeah, so I think the options would be to continue the project and see it again at a future meeting, or to take a vote on the design guidelines. And I think my vote would be that there's a few that aren't met yet, and move the project forward.
Which, if I'm gonna guess, is what I would think based on our rules meeting would be what Sarah. Number of meetings is strong guidance for you. So us saying, so the preference generally speaking would be for us to vote no on the guidelines that have not been met, but not necessarily not approve the project.
Yeah, and again, I guess we're not approving or disproving, we're just kind of weighing in on or not
Yeah.
the design guidelines have been met at this stage.
So I'm assuming that would put Courtney in the position where she has to kind of like read all of the guidelines and we kind of go through them one by one.
And this is where I need Andrew Grominski's assistance on the high-rise design guidelines, please.
Another option would be just to highlight this is Andrew G, by the way. Another option would be to just highlight the design guidelines that are not applicable or not met for this project.
I think we would need to go through those to know what they are, though. Like,
Oh, I see. So sorry, my apologies. I wasn't sure if you've actually already identified what those guidelines are, but I guess that's not the case. So I will get those up and I can read them if that is helpful, Courtney.
Yes,
So in that case, you
please.
vote that design guidelines, except for certain ones to be identified, have been met.
Yeah, that is correct.
Okay, that's fine with me. And then that allows the project to continue to move forward.
you see,
All right, so
Deborah,
however
Sherry, you good with that?
Yeah, I'm good with that. I think I understand what's happening. So it's approving it based on the high-rise guidelines, except for the ones that don't apply or aren't being met. Can you clarify?
We're saying that they haven't met all of the requirements, which they haven't, but we're not necessarily commenting that on as a negative. It's just that at this stage in the game, they haven't yet.
Yeah.
Not
And
demonstrated.
I think it's highlighting for the planning board. It's the planning board that
I see.
those design guidelines are ones that they may want to pay attention to.
Need to review with further diligence.
Based on what we've seen in front of us at this stage, which is going to be different than for what planning board gets in front of them and however.
So yeah,
This is
I get it.
This is Andrew Grominski. I recommend that maybe there's two motions, a motion for the design guidelines that have been met, and then a motion that for the ones that have not been met. Just so we have that that motion in writing and they're clearly identified.
That's fine.
So Courtney, do you want me to go through the list of guidelines right now, just in order, and then maybe we can identify which ones that are applicable and the ones that not been met.
I
can
think
keep
that would
track.
be helpful, just also
Okay.
to make sure the commissioners are all aware.
Sure. So whenever you're ready, I will go through that list.
Oh boy, okay.
So starting with architectural design guideline A, facade should be visually divided into a series of architectural bays that are derived in general from the building's structural bay spacing.
Let's say yes.
You want me to move on?
Sure.
Sure.
Okay. Guideline B. Piers, pilasters, or other features defining each architectural bay should either extend all the way to the ground or terminate at any horizontal articulation defining the base of the building.
Kinda.
Maybe the best, I mean, just so this doesn't take forever, the best way to do it is just to go through them, and then if there's any, I mean, I think that for me, there's two of these that I would say no on.
What you always can do, feel free to stop me if you want to discuss any, but I will just continue on then. All right, so design guideline C. Architectural bays should align in general with individual or groups of storefronts and lobby entrances. Design guideline D. Piers, pilasters, and other features defining each architectural bay should always project forward and be uninterrupted by any horizontal articulation, excluding any horizontal articulation used to differentiate the base of the building. E. The facade of the building with 5 or more stories should be visually divided into at least a horizontal I'm not saying that right. Tripartite division, basically the base, middle, and top. The horizontal divisions may not shift up or down across the width of the facade. F. Vents, exhausts, and other utility features on building facades should be architecturally integrated into the design of the building and should be located to minimize adverse effects on pedestrians, comfort along sidewalks, and within open spaces. G. Buildings at terminated vistas should be articulated with design features that function as focal points. H. Fenestration glazing should be inset from the plane of exterior wall surfaces. I. Ribbon windows should be avoided. J. Autonomous and repetitive storefront or lobby systems, awnings, canopies, sign types, colors, or designs should be avoided. K. Storefronts and lobby entrances should include awnings or canopies to provide weather protection for pedestrians and reduce glare for storefront display areas. Awnings should be open-ended and operable. L. Lobby entrances for upper story uses should be optimally located, well-defined, clearly visible, and separate from the entrance for other ground story uses. M. Lobbies should be limited in both width and total area to preserve floor space and frontage for other ground story uses. Buildings should use any combination of facade articulation, a double height ceiling, a distinctive doorway, change in wall material, a change in paving material within the frontage area, or some other architectural element or elements to make lobbies visual and materially distinctive. N. The selection of materials, fenestration, and ornamentation should result in a consistent and harmonious composition that appears as a unified whole rather than a collection of unrelated parts. O. The type of color of material should be kept to a minimum, preferably 3 or fewer. P. 2 or more wall materials should be combined, only one above the other except for bay windows. Q. Wall materials appearing heavier in weight should be used below wall materials appearing lighter in weight, wood and metal above brick, and all 3 above stone. R. Horizontal or vertical board slidings or shingles, regardless of material, should be avoided. S. Architectural details and finished materials for the base of the building should be constructed of architectural concrete or precast cementitious panels, natural or cast stone, heavy gauge metal panels, glazed or unglazed architectural terracotta or brick. T. Exterior insulation and finished systems should be avoided. U. Rooftop mechanical penthouses and screening should be integrated into the overall building massing and architectural design of the building, appearing as an extension of the stories below or differentiated as one of the top of the horizontal division. Moving on to the last 2. V. Rooftop mechanical penthouses and screening should be located to minimize adverse environmental impacts on civic spaces, sidewalks, and abutting lots. The last design guideline for the HR zoning district, W. Vents, stacks, railings, and other components of mechanical equipment required to be outdoors or to project above a penthouse should be limited in height and located towards the center of the roof to every extent practicable. And do you want me to review any of those?
I feel like the things that we may want to see a little more information on has to do with the pedestrian or the user experience entering the building. You know, so there were some that talked about the materials of it, and maybe I just missed that part. And then the other, you know, is there anything interrupting, you know, negative that would have a negative impact on, you know, the passerby experience or the tenant experience, or yeah. So those are the things that I felt like, and I think there's only 1 or 2 that fall into that category.
Andrew Grominski, can you identify by your letter type which design guidelines relate to what Deborah is talking about, please?
I can also,
Yeah,
if
and
you
if
want, share my
others
screen.
agree with me on
The
that.
design guidelines.
What was that?
I can also share my screen. If
Yeah,
that's
that
all
would
right
be
with the applicant.
that would be
Yeah.
perfect.
Try to make this
It may be guideline S.
Are you seeing my screen?
Yes.
Fantastic. So I think Tim said it may be X, so I'm just going to scroll down there and highlight it for you. There is no X, Tim.
S.
S, sorry, my
like-
bad. That must have been me. I'm just going to highlight that.
Yeah.
So, architectural details and finished materials for the base of the building should be constructed of architectural concrete or precast cementitious panels, natural cast stone, heavy gauge metal panels, glazed or unglazed architectural terracotta or brick.
Did I miss that description? Was that already mentioned?
I was just highlighting it since Tim brought it up. Is that one that you wanted to discuss?
I think we really know what that is. So it's a little like the base level is a little undefined.
Yeah, so I think that would just be one for further
Yep.
development.
And then there was one about integration of the penthouse. I guess I'd like to know how that's being.
Yes, so that is you. That's design guideline U. I'm highlighting right here.
Yep. That's it. Okay.
But I think related to that would be Q, wall materials appearing heavier in weight should be used below wall materials appearing lighter. I think just my concern about the detailing of the penthouse screen is however the metal is detailed, it doesn't appear like a heavy top above the glass.
What about M? M is kind of related to Deborah's too, about architectural elements to make lobbies materially distinctive. I don't know that we kind of know that yet. This lobby is the full width of the area, except for the bike room.
Yeah, and I think that's,
Yes, that's right. Except for the bike room and the garage, and our lobby has a maximum dimension that complies with the 30-foot width. Courtney, if you could include in your notes that Tim was talking about the penthouse material, seeming like it's a lighter material than the material below it. I'm just worried that the planning board might assume that if we have two different materials like those vertical shards, that they might say one looks lighter or heavier than the other and they're side by side as opposed to stacked on top.
Any other ones? So I'm hearing that you all are supportive of the design guidelines with the exception of S, U, Q, and M.
I think the last one is just N, which is probably the most general out of all these. Again, I think clearly the direction the design is headed in is compliance with this guideline, the consistent harmonious composition, but I think until we see closer to final elevations, it's just not possible to confirm this one.
Any other ones? All right. So it's going to be really hard for me to go letter by letter and skip the exclusions. So can I say that there's a motion that the design guidelines have been met with the exception of S, U, Q, M, and N?
So motioned.
Seconded.
Right. Okay, I have a second from Deborah. The motion initiated by Andrew Arbaugh. Roll call vote. Andrew Arbaugh.
Yes.
Sherry Ruane.
Yes.
Tim Talon.
Yes.
Deborah Fennick.
Yes.
All right. And then I think we should take a motion for that the team should incorporate any design guidance that you all have given them. Do we have a motion for that?
So moved.
Seconded.
All right, I have a motion made by Deborah Fennick, seconded by Andrew, that the design proposal adopt the other additional design guidance the UDC has given tonight. Roll call vote, Andrew Arbaugh.
Just
Sherry
will we
Ruane.
review what
Ooh.
sorry. Will we review what that design guidance is, the list of additional guidance, when we review the?
If you can remind me, because I was not keeping my notes since I was not the lead chair this evening.
Okay. I don't have good notes either.
Andrew Gruminski, can you assist?
Yeah, so I wasn't taking notes. Wendy from our staff was, and I believe actually Sarah was taking notes as well, but she dropped. So I'm going to ask if Wendy can maybe provide some of what you guys said.
Well, another
Wendy,
way we
I
could
know-
do
I
it is
think you're
just
not-
give us the UDC recommendation in the future.
That is another
Just,
option. I was also going to say we can also make sure to provide that in writing to the applicant so they have it. And then again, what you did, since you now review UDC recommendations, you will have a chance to go over that. But we will make sure it's conveyed nonetheless.
Okay. Just want to make sure it's included in there is one Frank brought up the last time, just with related to not illuminating the penthouse or top of the building.
Yeah, that we'll make sure that the written UDC recommendation includes everything that was discussed. Thank you.
All right, so then should we have a motion to adopt the future written design guidelines? Or I'm sorry, design guidance. I don't want to mess up the terminology here. That will be issued to the design team. Does that sound right as a motion?
So motioned.
moved.
Okay, well, I heard Tim first and then Andrew, so. Roll call vote, Andrew Arbaugh,
Yes.
Sherry Ruane,
Yes.
Tim Talon,
Yes.
Deborah Fennick.
Yes.
All right, I think that's all of the votes, correct, Andrew Gruminski?
That is correct.
All right. It's 15 McGrath. I'm get all my McGrath addresses.
35.
35. All right. I was between you and yeah, 15 and 10. So thank you, 35 McGrath. You will receive all the written documents from the UDC about this case in the future. But thank you
guys
for
so much.
presenting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thanks.
it.
All right, so then we have no other business to attend to this evening. So do I have a motion to adjourn for the evening?
So motioned.
Do I have a second? Okay, motion by Andrew, seconded by Deborah. Roll call vote, Andrew Arbaugh,
Yes, please.
Sherry Ruane,
Yes.
Tim Talon,
Yes.
Deborah Fennick.
Yes.
All right, the motion has been made to adjourn the evening. meeting. Thank you very much for attending. Have a good night.
You
Good night,
too.
everyone.
Bye all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.